Well, it's a busy time for ag producers in this province. Farmers from across Saskatchewan are gathered in Langham right now for the Ag in Motion Outdoor Farm Expo. And at the same time, agriculture ministers and producers from this province and across Canada are gathering in Whitehorse to voice their own concerns. So today on Blue Sky, we'll hear about some of the issues that are top of mind for farmers in this province, from extreme weather events to trade and protectionist policies. We'll dig into it all. If you are a farmer here, we want to hear from you. What is the biggest issue operations faces right now? Call 1-800-716-2221, or you can email bluesky@cbc.ca. Canada's agriculture ministers, including Saskatchewan's Ag Minister David Marit, are gathering in Whitehorse this week. And recent data from the Angus Reid Institute suggests they have a lot to discuss. The survey polled over 500 stakeholders. And to find out more about what they said, we are joined by Dave Krasinski. He is research director with the Angus Reid Institute, and he's on the line now. Hi there, Dave.
Hi, Candace. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. What made you want to do this survey?
Well, it's actually a partnership project. So we were working with the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute and the Global Institute for Food Security. And it developed out of just an idea of let's, talk to people in the industry and the agriculture sector and see down the line, what are they concerned about? What are they dealing with now? So we kind of built a timeline of challenges. And what are the levels of hope and optimism like? Because I think that's important too, is we've got to forecast and see what the expectations are, what the challenges are, but also, what the opportunities are. So it was just a big kind of look at the sector, and it aligned really nicely with the agriculture ministers meeting this week and a lot of the agriculture sector activity that's going on this summer. So partnership project that just kind of wanted to scan the sector.
Who all was surveyed?
So there are 549 individuals across the industry who were surveyed. So we asked them things like how long they've been in the industry for, what part they're in. So, for example, 59% are within the industry, either producers, processors, distributors. 17% are civil society members, so working with NGOs, academia, that sort of thing. About 10% are in government, so a pretty wide array from farmers to people who are working on policy, and right around 550 individuals who are able to kind of share their experiences with us.
There seem to be three core concerns that emerged out of this. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of concerns. Is one of the things that I'm learning. Obviously, I'm not a farmer, so it was interesting for me to learn just the breadth of challenges that the industry faces right now. The biggest things that do pop up are the policy and regulatory environment. We've certainly seen issues with that in terms of domestic policy, the carbon tax. Supply management is always a ongoing concern, especially dealing with something like the United Kingdom's Fair Trade Agreement, which to many accounts was kind of torpedoed by not wanting to change some of those supply management standards. So policy and regulations are really big for people in the industry right now. Extreme weather, and if you add climate change to that, really comes out as a very high one. So 61% said policy, 52% said extreme weather, but an additional 34% said that climate change is a worry for them as well. And the other one that rounds out the top three is trade barriers and protectionism. And those are just always issues. We've seen country of origin labeling being a really big issue with the United States over the last couple of months. So trying to keep up with what the expectations are, what the kind of market parameters are, I think is always top of mind for people who are working either in policy or in fields in actual farming work.
We know that ag ministers are meeting in Whitehorse this week. What confidence do you think people in the survey had about the government solving any of these problems?
Yeah, that's the biggest kind of negative takeaway, is that a lot of people look at these challenges and say, this is something we're dealing with right now. This is either a manageable or a difficult challenge. in a lot of cases. And if you ask them, okay, it's a challenge, but do you have any level of confidence in the government in solving this? Only 7%, for example, say that they think that the current policy framework in Canada is going to effectively reduce or mitigate the regulation challenges that they're seeing. When it comes to extreme weather, it's only 9%. It jumps to 15% for overcoming some of the trade barrier challenges, and that one tends to be a little bit higher among those people who are working in government. It's closer to 25-30%. But for farmers looking at this, there's really not a lot of confidence either in the public sector or the private sector to be able to overcome these challenges. So it's something where they're looking at it and saying, maybe some things have to change. Maybe we've got to work together. We've certainly these conferences tend to, there are some really strong cooperative outcomes that can come out of this. But it's a really difficult challenge right now, particularly with inflation and the regulatory environment.
I'm Candice Lipsky. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. I'm speaking with Dave Krasinski right now from the Angus Reid Institute. That organization just did a big agriculture study, and we want to hear from farmers or ag workers in the province as well. What are some of the big issues you're facing as a farmer? Give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or you can email us, bluesky@cbc.ca. Dave, we talked a little bit about those top three concerns: policy, regulatory environment, extreme weather, trade barriers, and protectionism. But just this week, CBC Saskatchewan had a story about skyrocketing farmland prices and how that's affecting family farms. Here's third-generation farmer Darren Kress, who runs a 2,000-hectare mixed grain and cattle farm near Odessa.
Right from the start, it was always tough, and the price of farmland has gone up every year, since then. And what you once thought was a high price, it only got higher. The land that my dad owns here is, it's went up. It's 10 times the value it was, since he has bought it. And will we see it 10 times the value of that in another generation? I don't know.
How common were those kinds of concerns from farmers, Dave?
Yeah, those are certainly, there's a large second tier. So once you get past those first three that we were talking about, those are issues that are chosen by at least half of people who participated in the survey. But that doesn't mean that they're the only three. We've got a number that were chosen by at least a quarter, and some of those that touch on that issue. I think farm income and debt at 36%, the loss of farmland at 32%, and farm transition and succession is a big issue. This is a generational sector in a lot of cases. And 28% say that presents a challenge. So I think that in addition to kind of navigating the policy and regulatory environment that can be changing, there are these more simple to understand for the common person who might not be in the industry. It's just a challenge of what the land is worth, what the land is capable of producing, and who's going to take it over when the primary kind of governor of the land is ready to move on or wants to pass it on to somebody else. These are really big challenges, and I think there's one other one that really speaks to that as well. Is 35% shows human resources, so just labor as a big challenge, and 90% say that's already a problem that they're dealing with, and they're having a lot of difficulties. So I think the scale of challenge is really interesting, and it kind of, when you look at the optimism levels, it almost doesn't add up to the views that a lot of people in the industry have, in the sector have. They're saying, I think it'll be all right. But then you look at the issues that people are dealing with, and it is an immense challenge.
I want to talk more about that. We are going to be hearing from Saskatchewan farmers coming up. But before we let you go, Dave, I know you asked about the overall mood, if folks were optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the agri-food sector. So what were people saying?
Yeah, so it's there's a little bit more optimism from people who maybe aren't directly connected to the farming activities. People who are in that more policy-oriented government or civil society sector. We broke it out by large urban versus rural or remote areas, and you do have 62% who say that they're positive overall. They're feeling optimistic. They see a lot of opportunities in international markets that they think that Canada is pretty well positioned to take advantage of if we can overcome some of these regulatory and trade barrier issues. But in remote areas, in rural areas, 69% optimism drops to about 51%. So there is quite a gap there. And people who are still, actively working in the industry are maybe not as have quite a rosy view as people who are looking at this from a government perspective or in civil society, kind of working in a less tangible, physical kind of way on farms.
Dave, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for looking into this.
No problem. Thank you for covering it. That's great.
Dave Krasinski is a research director with the Angus Reid Institute. Today on Blue Sky, we're talking about some of the most significant threats to Canadian agriculture and the ways that farmers and food producers are adapting. We're hearing from experts, from farmers and ranchers, and we'd love to hear from you too. If you're a farmer working in the industry, how are you adapting? What are some of the big problems you're facing? We'd love to hear from you. Email us, bluesky@cbc.ca, or call us at 1-800-716-2221. Now, the research we were just talking about was supported by the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute and the Global Institute for Food Security at the University of Saskatchewan. Yesterday, I spoke with Angela Bedard-Hahn about this Angus Reid report. She is Dean of the University of Saskatchewan's College of Agriculture and Bioresources. I asked her what stands out to her from this survey.
When you're within the industry, you recognize that that the world will always need food, right? So there's going to be a major demand for the food, the agriculture, agri-food within the products that are coming out of Canada. So, coming out of that, when we look at the opportunities from within the sector, we can see that there's room for growth. There's room for growth both in domestic markets for our food products, but also there's a lot of potential for further development of our international markets, and particularly some of the big emerging markets like India, Bangladesh, some of the other ASEAN countries. There's a lot of room for growth, and so along with that, collaboration across other sectors, academia, NGOs. So I think there's good reason for that optimism based on what you see from the inside of the sector.
It sounds like crops are doing quite well. We've had a wet spring, but before that, of course, there were many years where it's been very, very dry. What are the most significant impacts of climate change on Canada's agriculture sector?
It is really those extremes, and so that adds to the risk environment. So when you're already dealing with with an industry that's got pretty tight profit margins, things that can cause that sort of swing in your production have a very dramatic effect. And as you mentioned, we've had a number of very dry years, but that can be layered on top of that. You might be having a very dry year and then some sort of extreme precipitation event that floods out what bit of crop that you do have. And so, being able to adapt or be resilient to those kinds of extremes that might hit you both within a single growing season, that's the big challenge that we're facing here, and it's true of both our cropping sector and our livestock sector.
So how are Canadian farmers adapting to these changes?
There's a few pieces that they're working on. One is the agronomy, and so here in Saskatchewan, where we've got widespread adoption of conservation tillage, and that's had a few really key impacts. Not only has it reduced our risk of soil erosion, but by building up soil organic matter, it's making for healthier soils. So when we get those extreme precipitation events, soils with better structure because of their management practices, that water will drain away, it'll infiltrate more readily instead of just running off. So that's great. And then on in the drier years, that having more soil organic matter can help the soils hold on to what bit of moisture and nutrients they do have, so they become more resilient under both extremes, as well as under good conditions like we've been seeing much of these last few weeks.
I want to talk a little bit about policy too. Do you believe current trade policies are supporting agricultural exports? I know this was one of the other big issues that farmers brought up.
Yeah, I think some of the policy challenges that we're seeing, we're definitely seeing challenges on the labor force, and here in the prairies, with all the pulse crops that we produce, some of the challenges we've been facing with some of our big global markets like India, that has a big impact on our ability to export our crops when we face some of those types of international barriers. So those are some of the challenges that we're facing. I think that one of the key pieces we need to do, and I think Saskatchewan is doing a good job of this, is really getting out there and talking about the some of the advantages of our production systems relative to some of the other markets that are out there, and making the case for the safety and sustainability of our food supply. And so that's some of the key pieces we need to make sure we're doing. That we're a small country relatively in terms of population, but we can have a big impact, and we need to get out there and make sure that we're telling that story.
Angela, just before we let you go, ministers at different levels of government are meeting right now in Whitehorse. In your opinion, what do you think should be at the top of their agenda?
The ministers need to be thinking collectively about what sort of investments are appropriate to make sure that we stay at that leading edge of innovation.
Angela Bedard-Hahn is Dean of the University of Saskatchewan's College of Agriculture and Bioresources. I'm Candice Lipsky, filling in for Alicia Grabinski. You are listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. That's 94.1 FM in Saskatoon, 102.5 FM in Regina, and 540 AM across the province. Today we are talking about farmers and all the challenges that come along with farming. If you work in the industry and you are facing some of these issues we've been hearing about, we'd love to hear about your experiences. You can email bluesky@cbc.ca or give us a call, 1-800-716-2221. Well, Jeremy Welter has a grain farm near Kerrobert. He's a board member with APAS. That's the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan. He's been listening into the show, and he's on the line now. Welcome to Blue Sky, Jeremy.
Hi, thanks.
First off, can you tell us about your own farming operation?
Yeah, so I mean, we farm in West Central Saskatchewan, just northeast of Kerrobert. We've got 3,400 acres of mostly rented grain land, and we produce oil seeds, pulses, and cereals.
You've been listening into the show so far. We just heard from the Dean of the University of Saskatchewan's College of Agriculture and Bioresources. What has stood out to you so far about some of what we've been hearing?
I think one of the key points that she mentioned was continuing investment. We've gone through in probably the last 40 years, a lot of growth and a lot of change, and I think it's reasonable to say in that time period there was a significant amount of government investment in the public good that agriculture provides. Now with the changing economic realities and increased inflation, those dollars don't go as far, and so we need to ensure that the both the federal and the provincial governments are at minimum maintaining based on inflationary factors, but ideally they would be increasing investment into the public good that agriculture provides.
So investment aside, what else is top of mind for you as a farmer in 2024 in Saskatchewan?
Having gone through a 3-year period of somewhere between mid and significant drought, looking at the next 10 days and seeing that they're going to all be above 30, weather is always going to be one of the major topics of concern, because it affects what we do so much, and we have really so little control over it.
When you were talking about inflation a moment ago, I'm curious, what is the cost of your operations of such a large farming operation?
So, I mean, based on the provincial average, we're probably slightly, I think we probably fit into the average. That being said, there's definitely farms that are far larger than we are. The crop this year on 3,400 acres is going to probably cost us for only seed, fertilizer, and chemical north of $650,000. And that's only on 3,400 acres. Saskatchewan has 55 million acres of cropland. It is an absolutely massive investment into our operation, and we do that every year. And again, that does not include machinery payments. It doesn't include depreciation. It doesn't include fuel. It doesn't include oil. There's all sorts of things that aren't included in that. But that is, that's a number for a portion of the investment in the operation. It's significant, and so when you look at the economics of farming, it's not something that's undertaken lightly.
And have you noticed the cost of some of those things that you just mentioned? Have they been? I imagine they've been increasing in the past few years. What kind of an increase have you noticed?
It's probably been on the scale of 10 to 15%. On that specific side of things. APAS released a press release in 2021 talking about the crop in 2021. That was the most expensive crop Saskatchewan had ever put in, and costs have continued to climb over the last 3 years. Our input retailer mentioned to us, and I'm sure he's mentioned to another number of other people, there was a significant number of farmers who had to, submit for credit increases so they could continue getting product to finish putting in the crop.
For sure. Jeremy, I have a lot more questions, so stay on the line. I'm speaking right now with Jeremy Welter. He has a grain farm near Carrabert. Well, today on Blue Sky, we're talking about some of the most significant threats to Canadian agriculture and the ways that farmers and food producers are adapting. We're hearing from experts, farmers, ranchers, and if you are part of the ag industry, we'd love to hear from you too. What are some of the biggest issues you're facing as a farmer? How are you adapting? Email us, bluesky@cbc.ca, or you can give us a call, 1-800-716-2221. Let's get back to Jeremy Welter. He's a grain farmer near Carrabert. He's also a board member with APAS, which is the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan. Jeremy, I'm wondering about a potential railway strike. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there and how concerned you are about it?
I don't know the ins and outs. I know that the two unions, or maybe there's one union between the two railroads, and the two companies are obviously having difficulty coming to an agreement. My concern is from a grain movement perspective. We access markets because of the fact that we are a reliable exporter of grains and oilseeds. If countries start to look at us as unreliable, then those markets will go elsewhere because we are not the only producer of grains and oilseeds. Now, I very firmly believe that we are one of the top producers as far as quality goes, and so those countries will always need that quality. But they can certainly access grain from other markets, and so if we are viewed as unreliable due to a strike and our inability to get those products to market, then we lose out on those markets, and ultimately it means that our commodities are not valued as highly, and that ultimately affects the bottom line of farmers across Western Canada, specifically in Saskatchewan, obviously, because we're land bound. We have no access to port other than through rail lines.
How does it feel? I always wonder about farmers can't control the weather, but they also can't control things like other folks striking. So I wonder how that kind of stress impacts you.
It's definitely something that is a weight on your mind. I would say, maybe not optimistically, but certainly hopeful that the federal government, when it comes specifically to rail lines, their legislation is federal. So, my hope is that with the fact that we've only got two companies, that it's a duopoly. My hope is that the federal government recognizes that and will work to bring both sides together to ensure that there's no disruption, because I look at it obviously from a grain shipping perspective, but that's not the only thing the rail lines do. They're bringing in consumer products. They're also bringing in food. They're bringing in fresh produce. They ship heating oil to Eastern Canada in the wintertime. There's a lot that the rail lines are responsible for, and so I would say I hope that the federal government recognizes that, and I hope that the unions and the rail company can work together to avoid a strike, to come to an agreement on the contract for the workers.
We do have a caller on the line right now. Let's go to them. Elmer is in Regina. Hi, Elmer.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to call out as a consumer, my experience of farming. Of course, my father had a farm in the West Coast before the Second World War, and now it's just greenhouses, right? But, when you talk about prices for agricultural, and of course he was in the poultry business as well here in Saskatchewan, but it's always about the domestic, what people consume here. And if the emphasis is on export crops, cash crops, for, the bottom line, you're going to expect that the focus is on making that money. And is that an explanation for why the food costs are so high? They're focusing too much on export. And of course, the price of land, everybody wants more land, but it's all corporate prices we're talking about. We're not talking about regular folks buying, land for the domestic economy. So see, that's how I recognize why the prices are so well. I'm not complaining. You got to eat, but we're talking about poultry and eggs and that. I mean, that stuff isn't exported unless it's processed somehow. We don't have that, but that's the only point I'd like to make. I think there should be more focus on domestic economy production rather than export, for food prices. But I mean, that's not the solution. Obviously, the province needs to make export dollars, but that's a point I'd like to make about food. You have, everybody says you work at a grocery store. Everybody says you have to buy local, and that's a good point to be made.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Elmer, yeah, thanks very much for that. Jeremy, do you have thoughts on exports and even this idea of corporations buying up land?
I mean, not to sound too political, but that was genuinely a great question, Elmer. Thank you very much. So the 2 points you made, the first one I'd like to touch on because I feel maybe I've got a little bit more experience on it. The cost and relationship between the farmer share of the food dollar, which if you go to the APAS website, you can actually find a report that we've now updated. So we originally released the report in 23, and it was based on 22 prices. We've now released it for 24 based on 23 prices, and it's literally titled The Farmer's Share of the Food Dollar. And so what it shows is the relationship between the cost of what you pay in the grocery store, say for example, for a loaf of bread or a pound of lentils or a bottle of beer, and how much of that money goes back to the farm gate, to the producers. Now the key takeaway from that is that farmers are price takers. We are not price setters. We do not in any way, shape, or form get to set the prices for our commodities. We take the price for our commodities, and those prices are based on worldwide markets, supply and demand. There's a number of different things that go into that. But what it shows is that in 23, the 22 price, say for example, for canola averaged, somewhere between $18 and $22 a bushel. Now there are obviously, periods where it was higher, but that was kind of an average. In 24, for 23 prices, that dropped back to between $12 and $15. Now, that effectively means that farmers saw, a 15, 25% pay cut on their commodities. I'm going to say I assume, but I know for a fact that did not translate into a 15% decrease on the cost of groceries across the board. And these this trend is replicated not just on canola. It happened in wheat, it happened in barley, it happened in lentils. Commodities fell throughout 23 and obviously going into 24. Those falling commodity prices did not translate into a decrease in grocery costs. So it becomes very obvious the fact that the increased cost of food in the grocery store is not something that can be directly tied back to farmers and what they're getting paid for their commodities. As far as land prices go, there's obviously a number of different aspects. As a producer, I would say I'm concerned with the rising cost of land prices, but that's because I'm in the market to buy land. I'm not sitting on a nest egg of a bunch of land waiting to sell. The concern, I think the major concern for most producers now is the fact that the value of that land is in no way, shape, or form tied to the productive capability of that land. So the question then becomes if an average quarter of land costs X number of dollars, and you sit down and you run your cost of production and you say, well, I'm going to produce X number of various crops in your healthy land rotation. A 25-year mortgage makes sense because my 25-year productive capability of each of these crops, my cost of production, et cetera, it makes sense. It's no longer like that, and it hasn't been like that probably for between 5 and 10 years, depending on who you talk to. So it becomes a question of, well, if farmers are unable to finance that land based on productive capability, they begin financing it based on speculation. Now, we've seen exactly what happened when land was purchased on speculation prices back in the late 80s and early 90s. And I can speak personally to the local area. It decimated some of the local credit unions who invested in that land. The last thing we want to see is land values increasing based solely on speculation.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy, you are a wealth of knowledge. I'm going to get back to you in just a few minutes. We're going to hear from another farming operation right now. Jeremy Welter has a grain farm near Robert. We'll go back to him. But first, Erica and Kyle Stewart have been honored by Canada's Outstanding Young Farmers Program. The couple runs Pine Ranch in Morse, Saskatchewan, where they raise cows and grass yearlings. They're both busy right now at Ag in Motion over the noon hour today, but I caught up with Erica earlier on today.
So I was actually born on my family's ranch, which we called Pine Ranch, in Merritt, BC. So I've grown up on a ranch my whole life.
And was your whole family part of that ranch back in BC?
Yes.
Why was it something that you wanted to keep up with once you moved to Saskatchewan?
So from when I was very little, I knew that I wanted to be a rancher. I was always out helping my dad and grandpa. Started riding, moving cows when I was really little. I just loved following them around the barnyard. I don't know. It's just something that I knew that I wanted to do, and I always wanted that to be a part of my life.
So you moved to Saskatchewan, and then how did you get the Pine Ranch Saskatchewan version started?
Sure. So, like I said, I grew up in Merritt, BC. That's where my family ranched. That's where we had our place. There was just a lot of obstacles where we were. So we actually decided to sell our land in BC and buy some land in Saskatchewan. So we moved our cows and our whole ranching operation out to Morse, Saskatchewan in 2017.
And what are the biggest concerns you've faced as a farming operation since you came to Saskatchewan since 2017?
Well, unfortunately, the biggest one would probably be drought. We joke that our neighbors probably weren't excited that we moved because it was quite wet years previous to 2017. And then the year we moved, the kind of taps turned off and we hadn't gotten rain in 7 years. It's been extremely dry and extremely hard. Thankfully, we have gotten some rain this year. And so we are very thankful for that. So weather plays a huge role in it. for sure. And it's hard. Like we're essentially, our job description is working with Mother Nature, and we never know, what that might bring us. But that's one of the things that I really like about ranching is it's not the same. It's not a 9 to 5 that you may go to and it's kind of the same every day. It's always different. Year to year is different. Month to month different. And the other thing that the drought is kind of, I don't want to say helped us because it's been very hard. We've had to sell a lot of cows. Like it's been a hard 7 years, but it's really kind of shown maybe some weaknesses, and from that, like big learning opportunities. So we've really honed in on our grazing management and done a bunch of learning, and are really trying to implement some different ways to graze to hopefully kind of drought proof our ranch for the next time that happens.
I want to talk more about that in just a moment, but can you just describe a little bit more like how drought affects your operation?
For sure. So the main thing, like we're ranchers, so we raise livestock, but really at the base of it, we're raising grass, right? We need grass to grow so our cows can eat that grass and grow. And when there's no rain, the grass hardly grows. So that's a big thing, just like feed availability for summer, like grass growing in the summer, but also feed production. So we used to put up silage to feed in the winter months. And last year, actually, just nothing grew. And what did grow, the grasshoppers got. So we literally had nothing for winter feeds. We had to buy all of our feed. So those are huge unexpected costs. And then the grass, like that's what cows are meant to eat. So when the soil's healthy and the grass is healthy, it also has a lot of nutrients, kind of like when we take a multivitamin, right? They get minerals and nutrients from the grass, and there just wasn't any of that. So then there's also negative ramifications from that. So like we'd have less cows pregnant at preg check, right? And that's how we make a living. That's our business, is to have calves, like, your calf crop the following year. So we had just a lot of open cows, didn't have enough feed or grass, so had to sell cows. So that doesn't really help, growing a business or being a sustainable business economically.
So you just touched on it a moment ago. So what adaptations have you had to make?
Yeah, so definitely we had to sell a lot of cows. So we're probably like 100 mother cows, short than when we moved. And then kind of according to our goals and business plans, we bought some land based on increasing our herd to make payments. So that's been very tight. But then the grazing has been, kind of the silver lining that's come out of this. So we were pretty traditional before, continuous grazing, like turn them out into a field, maybe for a month, or like a field for us would be like 2 quarters or 3 quarters. Most of our fields are actually 3 quarters, but we've done a bunch of fencing. So we're going to try a lot of, like, it's called adaptive multi-paddock grazing. So it's high animal impact. So it's a lot of animals on a little space for a little time, and then with lots of rest. So that's a big thing we've learned, is just rest. So instead of having them, in those 3-quarter fields where they can be for a month, and maybe they take a bite of grass and then come back in a week when that grass is starting to grow again and take another bite, that's what can actually negatively affect the roots. And just, if that continues to happen, then that plant is less healthy. It's, sequestering more carbon, or sequestering less carbon, into the soil. And just is less healthy. So then if that plant dies, that makes space for weeds to come in and things like that. So the grazing thing is really interesting in soil health. And so one of the principles of soil health that we're really trying to focus on too is getting like litter cover or ground cover. So when we go to graze, make sure we're either leaving a lot or giving some fields like a whole year's rest. So it just grows, and then the following year when we turn the cows and say they like step all over that old grass, and then it'll cover bare spots in the soil, and that'll help the soil not get too hot. So let's say we do have another drought, it kind of helps protect, like shield the soil. And then that litter cover also helps retain moisture. So say when you have a lot of bare ground, it rains. Like last summer, we only got 2.5 inches of rain. And if you don't have good soil cover or good healthy soils, lots of that water is just going to run off. So out of 2.5 inches of rain, maybe we actually only got 1/2 inch rain that went down into our soil. But if you have good cover, that organic matter can actually act like a sponge and like holds that water. So those are some things we're really trying to focus on to just, improve our operation and hopefully make our soils better, our animals healthier. And then, if we can run more animals on the same amount of land, that does really help us become a bit more of a economically sustainable business.
It sounds to me like you've kind of had to become something of a soil scientist, and I know you were recently in the U.S. for a grazing learning opportunity as well. What was that about?
Yeah, so it was around the same principles. It's a rancher from Mexico, actually, Alejandro Carrero, who has kind of restored his desert ranch into like these beautiful grasslands. So in my mind, I was like, if you can do that in Mexico, surely I can do that in Saskatchewan. But it turns out when we went there, he actually gets a higher annual rainfall than we do. But still, it was a huge learning opportunity. It was a great conference and just a really great opportunity to be with kind of like-minded people who have tried these things and been doing it for years and seen success. So kind of to lean on them in a mentorship role too, right? To ask questions and see what they've done.
That was in Montana, right?
Yes, it was in Montana, in Ekalaka, so eastern Montana.
Okay. We've been talking a lot about day-to-day challenges on your ranch. It sounds like drought is really the big one. I'm wondering, Erica, like big picture, what do you see as the big risks to operations like your own, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a few that are, on our radar. I mean, policy is always one of them for sure. Land prices, land conversion too. Like in our area, we're in the Coteau Hills, so it's not meant for farming. You can't grow our soil's not good enough. It's very hilly. Like you can't grow good crops for human consumption. So that's why it's so neat to be able to run cows in those areas. So I just think having that in maybe more at the forefront, like there's some land that's marginal land that should be just used for cattle, not for crops. And land conversion is a huge issue. That would be one. And I think a little bit, this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, but social licensing. So just making sure that our consumers actually understand what we do and understand the passion and love and, education that we put into our ranches in terms of animal care and the environment. Like all those things are so important to us and huge values for us. And I think consumers, those are values to consumers too. But if we talk about it and have a good conversation, our values really align. People are interested in animal care and the environment, but so are we. And we're actually making huge strides and doing some pretty remarkable things to hit those goals and those values.
Farming is tough. This whole conversation, this whole show today kind of outlines that. What keeps you going?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think when it comes down to it, it's just I love my job. I love being a rancher. It's something I wanted to do since I was, like I said, very little. You just have that passion instilled in you and the love of learning. I hope I never, stop wanting to improve or learning. It's such a great career in that way that you can always learn. I appreciate being able to work outside with animals, that no day is ever the same. Sometimes it would nice to be a little similar or not so hard, but it just always challenges you. And the other thing my husband and I really appreciate is being able to really work as a family. We've got daughters and we can take them with us to work, right? Whereas if you had a typical job, that wouldn't be an option. So we appreciate just really doing our work as a family and hopefully instilling those values of hard work and love for the animals and passion for the environment and always doing better with our daughters.
And are your daughters showing interest in ranching? Do you think that they're going to take over the farm someday?
Yeah, I mean, we would definitely love that, but we don't want to push them. They need to, discover their own passions and values too. But yeah, they come with us. They really like it. Like I said, we've been doing a lot of different fencing. So we've put up miles and miles of electric fence this year and taking it down, and they're pretty good at putting in electric fence posts and taking them out, and they each have a horse and they ride with us. And so yeah, so far they enjoy it, which we really are thankful for.
Erica, really good to talk to you today, and all the best to you on the ranch.
Well, thank you so much for having me and sharing a little bit about beef production.
Erica Stewart and her husband, Kyle, farm in Morse. You're listening to Blue Sky right now on CBC Radio 1. We're talking about some of the issues that are top of mind for farmers and producers in this province. Jeremy Welter has a grain farm near Robert. He's our guest on the show today. Jeremy, I'm wondering, I know you're a parent as well, and do you think that your own child might want to go into farming?
there's always that possibility. Right now, he is dead set on being a Lego engineer, but he's 7, so things could definitely change. It would be fantastic if that was a direction he chose. At this point right now, our I would say our prime focus is giving him the advantages of growing up on a farm in a rural area. And I think there's a lot of those.
No doubt. We have another caller on the line right now. Aaron is near Empress. Hi, Aaron.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm just wind down my tractor here. I'm cutting hay right now. But anyway, I really appreciated the rancher lady that was just on. I think we're chasing many the same paths here, but we're more focused on the grain land, cropland. And to your question, the challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're going to face here in the next few decades is the fact that we have to wean ourselves off of pesticides and fertilizers or reduce them as much as possible. And so that's kind of our focus. Like the lady before was just talking about soil health and the microbiology, and that we've kind of lost focus in our farming direction on these things that are so important to producing a sustainable crop. So what we're doing on our farm right now, one experimental field I have is I've set up a seeder to seed alternate rows. So in one row in the field, I've seeded winter wheat, but in the spring, along with in the alternate row, then a mix of triticale, pardon me, and winter peas. So the concept there is they all come up together, and just last week here now, while the triticale and the peas are developing, I've crimped them down, or rolled them down, crimped them down to stop that growth, and they should then start from the ground up again, which will then keep the soil biology, the microbes, in action.
Aaron, we don't have much time left. But I'm really interested in this. I feel like we could have a whole show on soil health, but thank you very much for calling, Aaron. We don't have a ton of time left, Jeremy, but I'm wondering if soil health has been something that you've been really thinking deeply about as well.
Soil health is definitely one of those things that I think it's fair to say farmers everywhere are becoming more and more interested in. I look at soil health in this day and age in probably a very similar way to zero till 35 years ago. I think he made a very good point. I think that as the industry continues to grow and evolve, I think that we will see more of a focus on both plant health but soil health, because obviously plant health is directly tied to the health of the growing medium. It's a fascinating field, and it's one that I found myself very immersed in this spring while I was sitting on the air seeder, going back and forth across the field for 16 plus hours a day. Yeah. There's not a lot to do with the GPS driving the tractor for the majority of it. So you find something interesting, and had someone suggested to me that soil science was interesting, I probably would have laughed at them. But after immersing myself in it for 3 months and watching countless videos on it, I can certainly agree. There's far more happening underneath your feet than most people are aware of.
Jeremy, with very little time left, I do need to ask: are you optimistic about the future of farming in this province?
Yeah, I definitely think it's easy to get down in the mouth and look at all of the aspects of the industry that are challenging. But I think as farmers, we really are eternal optimists. We even in the last 3 years,
Yeah.
there were challenges to the drought and a lack of production, but at the end of the day, you look around and you go, well, there's always next year, and so we all basically came back and tried again next year, and now what we're seeing is my area specifically, we've probably had over 11 inches of rain in the growing season so far.
Yeah.
It's
been a good year.
The future is bright. It's all about where you put your focus, I think.
Jeremy, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jeremy Walter is a farmer near Corrobert and a board member with the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan. You've been listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. If you missed out, if you had a question or a concern you wanted to reach out to, you can still call us on Talkback, 1-800-661-7540, or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. Join us again tomorrow right here on CBC Radio 1.